Alright, you cunts, it's me, Dr. fucking McElvoid. It's not my real name, innit? But listen, I've got me hot mocha, I've got my nuts, and I'm here to talk about the boys. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. It's not a bad impression of Butcher, but it's got as much nuance as Carl Urban's character in the last 2 seasons. It's sort of one note. It's kind of shtick, innit? But we'll talk about that. Anyway, sit down, relax, and watch. You might fucking learn something. Alright. These nuts are good. So, hello and welcome to this video about the boys, which is over. It's a shame, isn't it? The boys is over. Some will say not a moment too soon. I mean, did the boys overstay its welcome? Probably. It ran 7 years. In the traditional TV landscape, it would have run for about 4. And 4 would have been enough, I would say. For one thing, we'd remember what happened between seasons, wouldn't we? That'd be a novelty, wouldn't it? I mean, going to this 5th season, I did have to watch some catch-up videos. But you have to do that with everything now, don't you? Because everything's on for too long. It takes too long to produce a short season of television to a cinematic standard. Plus, you know, the actors get too big and they go off and they do other things and they make other things. And not like the old days where they were just sort of tied down with a cast iron contract and just told to get on with it. I miss those days. So, was the boys finale any good? We'll deal with that, then we'll talk about the series more in general. I thought that it was a reasonably satisfying episode. I mean, what more do you want? You want a climax where Butcher beats the shit out of Homelander and Homelander's killed and, you know, he lives happily ever after with Starlight and so on. I mean, that's sort of what you wanted, isn't it? Or maybe you're a sadist. Maybe you wanted a finale where, I don't know, Homelander punched through Starlight's head and pulled out her brain and squashed it in it with his fist and, I don't know, and then castrated Huey. Is that what you wanted? Is that the finale you wanted to see? You did, didn't you? Sadistic little swine. But look, I've been online most of the day because I don't have anything better to do, and I've seen a few of the criticisms of this final episode. So let's deal with the main ones. The first is that at the death, Highlander sort of flipped character. You know, when he lost his powers, he became a whiny, childlike, terrified little boy, you know, kneeling at Butcher's feet, offering to do horrible things to him, anything to save his life. He was wretched, he was pathetic, he was exactly what we all hope Donald Trump will be one day, because, let's face it, Homelander these days is almost indistinguishable from the US president, quite deliberately. But I would say that psychologically that worked for me. You see, Homelander's character is shallow. He's all power. He is his powers. What else is he? He didn't have a proper childhood. This is a boy that's been screwed up psychologically. He's got an Oedipus complex. You know, he hates his dad. All the rest of it. It's fair to say that Homelander is a character whose childhood was stolen and whose adulthood has been basically co-opted by being a superhero. And that's all he is. A terrible superhero, an evil superhero, a corrupt superhero. But that's all he's become. And his confidence, such as it is, which is skin deep, is based entirely on that power, on that strength of being somebody who can laser people in half and all the rest of it. So in that final scene, it's all taken away from him. The basis on which his ego and his character is built is removed. And all that's left is him and Butcher, this man who hates him, who's come to kill him, who has a justifiable reason to kill him, an avenging devil. Well, if you didn't have any superpowers and Carl Urban came to beat you to death, you'd be scared too, wouldn't you? For me, that reaction, that moment of vulnerability, made perfect sense. Of course, he wasn't going to just be all false bravado and say, hey, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. It wasn't going to be like that, was it? Of course he was going to crumble. Of course he was going to be a little boy, frightened. Who wouldn't be? And of course, Butcher would have no mercy because, well, Homelander's been so nonchalantly psychotic and narcissistic and all the rest of it for so long. Well, didn't show anybody any compassion, including the people that the person he murdered in the final episode, the billionaire he flew into space, and all the rest of it. So, for me, that moment rang true. It may not be the finale you wanted, but I think the writers got that psychological beat right. Others say, well, it wasn't grand enough, it was too small scale, etc., etc. Well, if you call a fight in the Oval Office small scale, sure. Wasn't this thing always going to end in some sort of nexus of power, some symbolic place where Homelander was on the cusp of having absolute control over everything? It's always going to be something like that, wasn't it? Some people wanted him to destroy the world and make good on his threat to wipe out swathes of humanity, like that dream sequence early on where he lasers a whole crowd to death and all the rest of it. Well, okay, but how would the boys exactly deal with that? I mean, they're just a few people. It had to be small, it had to be intimate, it had to be self-contained. It had to be a fight in an enclosed space where they had half a chance of dealing with Homelander, containing him. What would they do against Homelander flying around the world lasering people to death, or Highlander in control of some superhero army? With the best will in the world, the boys wouldn't really have much of a defence against that, would they? Unless they were prepared to unleash the deadly virus that you might wanted to have seen Butcher use and destroy all the soups. But you want the show to end with genocide, do you? Who are you, Benjamin Netanyahu? In the interest of balance, you can also ignore that joke if you want. So, obviously, they couldn't do that. And, I, for one, was happy that Huey thwarted Butcher's attempt to unleash the virus, because it just seemed to me that, that's fear, that's despair, that's having no faith in the future, no optimism. Maybe Butcher was right when he said that, look, there's bound to be another Homelander. Well, maybe. If there was a false note in the finale, I think it was the idea that Vought would just carry on unchecked. I didn't like that. I didn't like, Gus Fring going on the TV and taking over the corporate. I understand what they're trying to say. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Corporate power always wins out in the end. Corporations are the most powerful force in the United States, and they will find a way to endure no matter how savagely their reputation has been harmed. But for God's sake, they've just facilitated somebody pretending to be God who almost took over the world. You'd think, wouldn't you, that the incoming US president, having safely dispatched Ashley and all the rest of it, would be minded to break Vought up. Not just introduce a sort of oversight committee, as he said when he rang Huey up, but, actually break up that corporation, or disband it even, and confiscate all its assets and sort of bring superheroes under federal control or whatever. Isn't that what they'd have to do under those circumstances? And you'd want to audit every suit there was and find out if any of them were lunatics, vet them properly. If they were insane, you'd want to put them in super prison, wouldn't you? Hey, that's a spin-off idea. Super prison. Prison for soups. Yeah, all right. So, look, the 5th season, perhaps a victim of a budget cut. Did all the money go to Vought Rising? Answer's yes. It wasn't much to look at. It was a lot of scenes in a lot of rooms. The boys' writing team will say, hey, loads happened in the 5th season. It was lots of intimate exchanges, but did we really know these characters any better at the end of the 5th season than we did at the beginning? I don't know, but the answer's no. There wasn't really any character development. Lots of characters died. It's not quite the same thing. Maybe they did slightly develop the relationship between Homelander and Soldier Boy, but not much. I think the 5th season, really, a lot of it was quite redundant. It could have, for me, have been a couple of 2-hour specials. I don't think it justified its 8-episode run. And I say that with some regret, because, of course, the 5th season was the season where they really, really lent into the whole Trump allegory. We have to ask the question with hindsight, would this have been a different show if it had run on traditional network television, if it had all been over by, say, 2023? Would it have been a different show? Because it didn't start off this way. The targets originally were more things like Marvel, superhero fatigue, the sanitized Hollywood product that we get, hence the sort of overcompensation in the boys with all the sadistic violence and swearing and all the rest of it. Isn't that really what the comic books and the TV show at the beginning were really getting at? Isn't that what they were really going for? There's definitely a point where the people producing the boys anticipated the return of Trump, saw the danger that he might be on his way back, and of course, understood that there would be certain dangers with that and the whole Project 2025 business, and decided that Homelander was essentially going to be their on-screen proxy. Did that do Homelander any favours as a character? I don't know. I mean, one might say that is a logical trajectory to have him become messianic and so on. But then you'd have to say, well, why wasn't he like that already? He's the most powerful soup in the world. He can do anything. He's virtually invulnerable. He's worshipped by half the world because they believe he's Superman. They don't know that he's an evil, demented psychotic. So why wouldn't he already have that sense of entitlement? Why wouldn't he consider himself a living god already? Why the late conversion to sort of godhood? Did the show do enough to sell that transformation? I'm not so sure. I think that it made sense in some respects because, there has to be an escalation of the stakes. Where do you go with a character who's invulnerable? Well, I suppose they would want to take things up a notch, wouldn't they? They would want to increase their grip on the rest of us. But I don't know. It was all very on the nose. And obviously, you're having a go at the religious right in America, you're having a go at the Christian right, you're having a go at the Trump administration exploiting the Christian right. Are these valid points? Yes. Whatever you may have heard on other YouTube channels, yes, of course. Satirically, these are relevant points. They call it Trump derangement syndrome. The rest of us just call it Trump watching. Trump is a delusional, insane narcissist, and arguably a psychotic. And he probably does have a bit of a god complex, hence his recent, talks about wiping out Iranian civilization and all the rest of it. This is a man that needs to have a check on his power more than probably any US president in modern times. And so, look, does Homelander represent that effectively? I suppose so, yes. But would a little more subtlety have made the show a bit better for those who don't hate Trump? Yes, I imagine it would. You see, that's the problem with sort of sailing so close to the wind. It's polarizing, isn't it? And that's why you've got to be careful in choosing your targets, and that's why you've got to be careful in how you present the message. It can be overdone, you can over-egg the pudding. You can be too didactic. Not all will agree, of course. So you're in the last 2 seasons in particular, your enjoyment of The Boys largely depended on where you sat on the political spectrum. It shouldn't really be like that, should it? But, how many people watching The Boys, to put it another way, who are Trump aficionados, who have their silly red, MAGA caps, and who believe that Trump is the greatest president in living memory, how many of them will watch The Boys and go, well, maybe I was wrong, maybe Trump is deranged, maybe he is the worst human being who's ever been elected to high office in the United States. Far more likely that you're preaching to the converted, in which case you are using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, aren't you? Speaking of which, these are really good, by the way. I recommend these. $2.75 at Asda if you're interested. They're so moorish. So moorish. I can't eat too many of these. So just reach through the screen and stop me, won't you? So, this was a show that was on a bit too long. It was on so long it lost some of its audience, alienated some of its audience. In the first 3 seasons, it was kind of scintillating. It was electric. It was horribly addictive. And one could argue more nuanced and therefore more interesting. I personally didn't mind the 4th season, though I can't remember much of it because of this enormous gap between seasons and the fact that I'm extremely lazy and I can't be bothered to go back and re-watch episodes. But my memory was that the 4th season still had a little bit of range, a little bit of depth. It wasn't just a sort of simple political allegory or, laser focused on one target. That's what the 5th season felt like to me. And for that reason, I would say the 5th season was a disappointment. That final episode, not bad. Not bad. A reasonably satisfying conclusion. But the 7 episodes that preceded it, I have to admit, were for me, ladies and genitals, a bit of a slog. And The Boys was many things in its first 3 seasons, but it certainly wasn't that. Will I miss Homelander and Butcher? Sure. I think Anthony Starr deserves a lot of credit, because even though the writing wasn't too subtle toward the end, he did produce what was a very, I thought, intelligent and nuanced performance. He created a character with something behind the eyes, not just lasers, but something more. As for Carl Urban, the rich man's Craig Fairbrass. Well, I love Carl Urban. I love his DeForest Kelly impression, which he gave us. I love his Judge Dredd, but I have to say, I thought that particularly in the 5th season, it was shtick. Know what I mean? What was there to Butcher really, except hatred and a colourful vocabulary? Not much, really. I don't think the writers really knew what to do with him in the end, other than have him be the ongoing antagonist stroke protagonist, the immoral member of the Boys. It's all very well in the final episode having Ryan say to him, "You're not a good person, I don't want to live with you anymore," and here he's shooting Butcher because basically Butcher's gone nuts. And that's fine, There's a redemption of sorts in dying, realising you've taken things too far. He got punished for his insanity. He lost Terror, the dog. But, it's a bit late. They want it both ways. We want Butcher to be bad, but we also want to see Butcher being bad. Anyway, that's a sort of an aside. So, The Boys is over, and The Boys franchise, however, is not. Vought Rising is on its way. We'll get to enjoy it all over again, but set in the 1940s. It's going to be a lot of fun, I'm sure. Well, I guess at least set in the 40s, it can't be about today's politics, so that'll be something, right? We'll force the writers to, I don't know, make a proper show again. What are they going to do? We'll find out, I'm sure. Until next time, I'm Dr. McAvoy. It's not my real name. Fuck off.